The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you and daunting me. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a ghost of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey.
In the rain.
Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just a ghost of you and me. It's just a smoking gasoline. It's just a
I know how to
ghost
do it.
of you and me. Of you and me. Don't let 'em take you away. Don't let 'em bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let 'em bring you down.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, the co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. What is up, Demon Hunters, Sugar Ladies, and Misfits? I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
All right, tonight's show is kind of a cool one. Pretty much every show we do on Staring into the Abyss is a cool one to me because I love this kind of stuff. But this one's especially interesting because it's kind of controversial as well. And I love controversial shows. This one is going to be about haunted and possessed dolls. Haunted and or possessed dolls. There's a lot of controversy about this because some people say that a doll can be haunted. Some people say that a doll cannot be haunted. Some people say that it can only be possessed, not haunted. Other people say a doll cannot be possessed because it does not have a soul. So there's a whole bunch of different angles that people go at on this subject. We're going to try, I don't know how successful we'll be tonight, but we're going to try to root through some of that and figure this thing out a little bit. One thing that you cannot deny is that there are a lot of different dolls that have paranormal activity associated with them. Everybody knows about Annabelle. Okay, that's the most famous one. The whole case with the Warrens and it's like the little Raggedy Ann doll. Everybody knows about that one. It was a movie made of it, everything. There's also Letta the Gypsy doll. There's a Voodoo Zombie doll. There is a Devil Baby doll. One called Poopa. One called Mandy, Palau, Ubin Barbie. There's a lot of different ones of these that we can go through, and I don't know if we'll have time to get into the history of each one of these dolls on the show. So what we're going to do instead is on the YouTube channel, I'm going to do separate videos for each one of those dolls and spend a couple minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, going through the history of each doll and explaining it and showing you pictures of the doll if they're available and explaining it better. If we went through each one of those dolls on this show, that would be pretty much the entire show, and we wouldn't be able to really talk about anything else. So we'll make separate videos for those. But first I want to get into what a haunted or possessed doll is. Okay, for all intensive purposes, it is just a normal doll. It's either handmade or it could be something that's mass-produced. Doesn't really matter. It could be a porcelain doll, it could be a plastic doll, it could be a stuffed doll, or even a stuffed animal like a teddy bear, stuffed dog, whatever. But it's something that is either cursed or possessed in some way. The earliest report of a haunted doll goes all the way back to ancient Egypt. It's the enemies of Ramses III. They tried to use wax images of him to bring about his death. So it was almost like a voodoo doll of sorts. That's the basic premise. They were trying to make dolls that looked like Ramesses III and cause him to die by killing the doll, if that makes sense. The dolls that are used in the rituals against Ramesses were said to be a living thing. They were actually living creatures. That's what the history says. And they would curse anyone who looked like them. So if they made a doll that looked like Ramesses III, then that doll would curse Ramesses III and try to bring about his death. That was the basic premise. They did this through ancient magic and ancient rituals. And the ancient Egyptians, they called these dolls poppets. They were basically effigies or voodoo dolls. And the dolls themselves are actually cursed because they're used to curse other people. Now, the term poppet is interesting because that's where we get the word puppet in English. To talk about, like, the Muppets on TV, or if somebody has a ventriloquist dummy, they're all called puppets. And the reason why they're called puppets originates with that term poppet from ancient Egypt, describing a living cursed doll that tried to kill. The reason we call them puppets is because they look like they're alive to us, because somebody is controlling them, whether, as a marionette through strings, or whether, they got the old hand up the backside making the mouth move deal. Whatever it is, the doll appears to be alive because a human being is controlling it and making it look that way. And it is reminiscent of the poppets of ancient Egypt. So it's just our English version of the word poppet, which is what puppet is. I thought that was kind of an interesting little tidbit to throw in. It doesn't really have anything to do with the haunted dolls per se, but I just thought it was very interesting. Basically, these poppets were created by early people for a couple different reasons. One, obviously, to curse people and do them harm. Other reasons they would make these things were for religious or ceremonial purposes. So basically, they would make the poppet or the effigy, and they would use it in a ceremony, whether it be a religious ceremony or, a ceremony having to do with black magic or whatever. That's traditionally what these things were used for, other than for cursing. It has a lot of ties to the occult. In Rome, these dolls were usually used in magical rituals, and they were more of an effigy in Rome than a cursed object, because they were used to represent the connection that the Romans would have to a particular god or goddess. So what they were used for was more of a ceremonial religious purpose in Rome. Egyptian priests and magicians would often use the poppets for ceremonial purposes also. But they did something very, very cool and interesting with these things as well. In the religious ceremonies, what they would do is they would use the poppet to rid the body of evil, is one of the uses. And basically what they would do is they would take all of the evil and all the sin that's inside of you, and they would cast that evil into the doll. So the doll would take on your sin. It would take on the evil that lives inside of you, cleansing your body, was the basic idea. We see this later on in the voodoo culture. They have a thing where they take an egg and they run the egg all over your body. What it's supposed to do is suck the evil juju out of you, basically. And all of that evil energy goes into the egg. And then they crack the egg open into a bowl after they're done, and usually there's like blood and hair inside the egg. It's really, really cool. Now that could be, a real thing, or it could be a simple, illusion, a magician's trick, to where they make a small pinprick hole in the egg with a needle, and they kind of stuff hair and blood in that way, and then they just cover it with a piece of clear tape, and you don't see it because they're holding the egg where the tape is on their hand, so you don't see the tape, and they run it over and then they crack it. Or they could just do a simple sleight of hand, or maybe it's 100% real, I don't know, but those are ways that they could have done it. So that's one thing that they would do in Egypt, was to use it to take the evil away. And they also used it to place curses on those who went against the will of the gods, or on those that offended them in some way, that they had a grudge against, they would use these things. And that was the use that I was talking about in the beginning, to where they would put a curse on the doll so that the doll would curse the person that it looks like. That's something that puppets have been used for historically, is to place curses on different people for either religious means or ceremonial means, or, you know, some underhanded purpose. Some of the earliest effigies or puppets were used by the African cultures, the Native American cultures, and even the European cultures. The European puppet, that has its roots in the early Germanic and Scandinavian tribes, and they use those for mainly ceremonial purposes. That practice has even carried over to modern day times. The Wiccans have actually adopted the practice of using puppets as a symbolic representation of the person that they're casting the spell on. And spells and the other things are performed on the puppet to basically transfer the effects of the spell from the puppet to the targeted individual that they're trying to hit with the spell. Whether it's a good spell, bad spell, whatever. That's it. The puppet is being used by modern day Wiccans as almost a conduit for them to cast a spell onto the puppet, and then the effects take place on the person that it looks like. They, like I said, they were used in all over the world. They can also be used for the opposite purposes. Okay, we've talked about curses, we've talked about ridding the body of evil and stuff like that, but the puppets can also be used in healing rituals, which is very interesting. So you could actually try to heal somebody using a puppet as well, not just do them harm. They would also be used to bind evil spirits. That's the thing I was talking about with the egg, where they run it across in voodoo, and the thing where they bind the evil spirits to the puppet and it takes it out of you. That's basically where, in modern day times, we hear about voodoo dolls, where if you stick the pin in the voodoo doll, the person feels it, or if you break the voodoo doll's leg, the person that the voodoo doll is for, their leg gets broken. That's where all of that comes from, is from the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Romans' use of puppets. That's where all that magic has its basis, and also from Africa and stuff like that. It's one of those subjects where a lot of people say that it doesn't exist, that it's not real. They say, oh yeah, haunted dolls are a joke. And I think maybe some of the reason why people feel that haunted dolls might be a joke is because it's become extremely commercial. You could go on to eBay, okay, or Amazon. I don't know if they have them on Amazon, but I know they have them on eBay. And you could buy all kinds of haunted stuff. Okay, you can buy haunted dolls. You can buy dolls that are supposedly possessed. You can buy haunted jewelry. You can buy all kinds of haunted items. And you can order them, pay your money, pay your shipping. It'll be shipped straight to your house. And you can have your very own slice of hell, so to speak. Most of the people that sell this stuff on eBay, most of the stuff that you buy off eBay that's supposedly haunted is absolute crap. It's garbage, it's nonsense, it is 100% not real. I'm not going to say that there is no actual haunted items being sold on eBay, because you never know. But the overwhelming majority is absolute garbage. It's just somebody trying to make a buck. I think that might have a lot to do with why people don't acknowledge the fact that this whole phenomenon of haunted dolls and possessed dolls might be real, is because of the commercialism that's taken place. But when you go back and you look at the history, you find that there is a lot of proof that this actually happened, that it actually existed throughout history. There are multiple cultures that, whether it's real or not, believe that it was, and have used dolls in ceremonies and religious practices, and to use to do magic on and to hurt people. Throughout history they've done this. So we can't turn a blind eye to the history and simply say this is not real, because history says it is. At least different cultures believe that it was. We have a tendency in our modern day culture to look back on the past and think that those people are stupid. We always think of people in the past as less civilized, less knowledgeable, less refined. like they just don't know the things that we know. They're not as smart as we are. And in reality, a lot of times, it's the exact opposite. I mean, if you go back even just to the 1800s, and you look at the testing of the 1800s, if you look at the tests that children had to take in order to graduate from elementary school up to middle school, right? If you just look at those tests, there are an overwhelming majority of our college students today could not pass those tests. Or if they did pass, then they would have one hell of a hard time doing so. I've actually seen these tests. I've researched and looked at them. They're tough. So the idea that people back in olden times weren't as smart as we are, didn't have the knowledge that we have, is simply wrong. If anything, we are some of the dumbest people in history. We really don't know anything anymore because we're not taught anything correctly anymore. Everything is taught to the test. People don't bother to memorize that much history anymore because they can simply Google it. Why learn it and look up things in books and go to libraries when you could just go on Wikipedia? So I think technology has made us dumber, really. But we look back at ancient civilizations and we think, oh, these people are really dumb. They really don't know anything. But think of the things that these people did. I mean, the ancient Egyptians believed in haunted dolls and possessed dolls. They believed that they could curse these items and it would actually cause physical harm to other people. Now we look at that and we laugh at them as a modern society, but we still can't explain how they built the pyramids. They achieved technological and engineering feats that we can't even imagine today. Like, we can't do the things that they did back then. So I don't think they're that dumb. Now, as far as the whole idea of whether a doll can be possessed or not, this is a very, very interesting question. Now, on the surface, you would look at it and you would say, well, in order to be possessed, you have to have a soul, right? So if a doll does not have a soul, it cannot be possessed. That would be the obvious logical thought. But that's not entirely true. Now, it is true that a doll does not have a soul, but it is not true that a doll cannot be possessed by a demon. Here in a little bit, when I get finished, I'm going to throw over to Old Boy, and he's going to explain this a lot better than I can. Because Old Boy actually has a lot of experience in the occult. He was a Wiccan warlock, and he had his own coven at one time. So he is very versed in this stuff. So I'm going to let him explain that here in a few minutes, because I think he'll do it a lot better justice than I'll be able to. But basically, a demon can enter into a doll and take up residence there in order to do a lot of different terrible things. Just because a doll does not have a soul does not mean that it cannot be possessed. Now, whether a doll can be haunted or not, that's another issue. I believe that anything can really be haunted, because all being haunted really means is that a ghost or some other paranormal entity is using that object to further its own goals, or to be a tool for that entity to affect the outside world, the actual physical world that we live in, to cross over from the dimension they're in to our dimension to do something or another, to cause a physical change in our universe. That's why you can have a haunted doll, you could have a haunted ring, you could have a haunted pencil sharpener. Really, if the ghost wanted to haunt a pencil sharpener, I don't see any reason why he couldn't. Now, this has to be a ghost that is not simply a replay ghost, one that's stuck in a loop, repeating the same thing over and over again. That kind of ghost is not going to haunt anything, really, other than a location where it's forced to relive whatever thing that it has to relive over and over again. We're talking about an intelligent entity here. We're talking about a poltergeist. We're talking about demons. We're talking about all those creepy crawly little things that live in the dark places of the universe that polite society doesn't like to discuss. Those things can absolutely haunt a doll. They can absolutely possess a doll. And the results can be extremely frightening. So I want to get into the whole doll possession thing a little bit deeper. So I'm going to throw over to Old Boy now, and I'm going to let him explain it to you. So Old Boy, you go ahead and take it away, brother, and explain the whole doll possession thing a little bit better.
Thank you, brother, and good evening, guys. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about different things on the possession of dolls. Okay, there's a couple things. See, the Warrens, we all know who they are. That's where the Annabelle story came from. You know, not the goofy looking doll on the movies. It's actually a Raggedy Ann doll. Well, what they believe is, and a lot of people believe is a doll can't possess, a demon can't possess the doll. Sorry. What they do is they hide in the doll and pretend that, you got to remember, demons are very powerful, so they can pretend to do anything. So they could pretend to be possessing the doll, friendly at first, but then you see what ends up happening. It's a doll trying to get into a human's body, so it latches on to the doll itself, and that's what basically happened with the Annabelle doll, and that's what they claim happened. And now they made all the movie crap you see on TV. So, or there's other things that could be that people say there is, because there's now the doll Robert. I know a little bit about this story. It's like a sailor doll. It was made in the 1900s or 1800s, I think, and it was after a boy. And supposedly the boy had died, so the owner had made I think it's the dad, had made the doll of a replica of his son, but they're saying what happened is the spirit of the boy went into the doll. And whoever has the doll, bad things happen, like people die or just crazy things happen, you know, just bad luck. The people who have this doll. So it's in a museum. I don't know who has it, but it's a really eerie looking doll. It looks like a sailor doll, but it just doesn't really have a face. And they're saying there's a spirit of somebody trapped in there. And that's another thing with voodoo, when you were talking about that. They say that you could trap your soul in these dolls. And that's where they can use those dolls, like the voodoo dolls. Hoodoo is originally voodoo, and then it became voodoo, but that's another story. Actually, we might do that show one night about voodoo. That would be an interesting one. Is you stick it, you you see it in the movies, they'll stick like somebody's eye, and you see them scream, or their leg, and they eventually die. Well, the whole thing, there's a truth to that. What they do is they say they can take why they make voodoo dolls is what they do is they'll take the doll and make it replica to the person, and they'll get some kind of something that they own that they care about, and somebody will they'll steal it or they'll get it some way or another, and they'll wrap it around. Then they'll put curses on the doll, and eventually they could steal your soul, they think, with these dolls. And that's with voodoo dolls. And then they say that witches could do that too, and whatever you want to believe. But some of these dolls can steal souls, and that's another theory. And some could be cursed, like it just was in the wrong, like Amityville. If it was like a doll in Amityville, it could just get cursed. There's something cursed it. There's a lot. There's that one too, that dolls can be cursed, like you were talking about the puppet thing. The name now in English is puppets, but it could be cursed because, like you were saying, it gets cursed too on top of everything. So you'll have these puppets or puppets. They'll get cursed, and over time, bad things will happen. Like there's a story about, I think, Lette, the gypsy doll. And it was made a couple hundred years ago, and they have a video about this doll. And it was like in all green. It was just really airy looking, ugly looking. And this doll, supposedly, like the guys took it to mediums. He took it all over the place. And people say there's an evil presence. They'll get sick, or bad things, or things around him will happen. And then every time he wants to sell it or get rid of the doll, he can't do it. He'll get the car. He'll go to the people's houses to sell it, or he can't get the doll out of the car because something doesn't want him to sell it. And see, there's where I personally believe that dolls can be possessed. And that's just my opinion, because I'll tell you a story in a minute about that. But I also think dolls can be gateways to demons possessing them and hiding them so they can get into your house or your soul, or in yourself, your body, not soul, but get into you. I also believe they can be cursed. I also believe they're gateways of stealing being your soul stuck in one of these damn dolls, and that's some people make those for that. And there's another story to that one too. But I'll tell you guys the story. My parents, my mom's a reverend, and I was into a lot of stuff. Everybody knows this a long time ago. But they used to have this stupid porcelain doll, but it was on a tree, like for a Christmas tree. It was like an ornament, like an angel. And every time my parents would put that, my mom would get a big ash tree. It'd be like 9 feet tall. They had a big ceiling, 10 feet tall. They would always get the biggest ash tree in the whole lot, hundreds of dollars. My mom, our house looked like Disney Christmas land or whatever you want to talk about. But she would put this stupid angel in this porcelain. I swear this thing, if I would walk by it, would watch me. And it would move, and my mom even noticed it. Like, it would move. I don't know whatever happened to that damn thing, but I would walk, and sometimes we would walk in, and the damn thing would be turned in another way. And I saw that the other day. I put a video for him, the top 10 haunting ghost, and it was kind of like what that ghost was doing in the video. And I would see that thing move, and I hated it. I wanted to bust it, but for some reason I didn't, because I told my mother, I'm like, dude, that thing watches me, and it's eerie. It was eerie. It was an ugly little porcelain doll that it had angel wings, but it was just eerie looking. I don't know if you ever seen that, James. They're like the ugly looking porcelain dolls. It was just, I didn't like it. I don't know what to explain it. It felt like I was getting watched by this damn doll all the time. And my mom even said, and then we had weird things happen. Like my mom would hear footsteps outside, like a cowboy walking around. It was just the craziest thing. I never liked those dolls. I don't like dolls as it is. I can't stand porcelain dolls or any kind of baby replica of a human, because I get an eerie feeling because of what I was involved in. That's why dolls look like humans, because originally some dolls were made for that, to take your soul. And and when I was in Wiccan, let's not get this right. I was involved in a lot of things back in my day. I never dealt with dolls, but I know the stories of dolls, and they are gateways. And I know there's going to be somebody out there that thinks they know what they're talking about, and they're going to argue with me, and I really don't care. That everybody's own to their own opinion. That's cool, and I could care less. But what I've dealt with in my personal life is I don't like dolls. They creep me out. They're like my one of them. I'm not really fear of them. I just don't like them. And back east, when I moved, my family lives in Pennsylvania. They live in an old 100-something-year-old house, and they had this big ass doll. You remember those old baby dolls, James? Like they were made like 100 years ago, but they were big, but they looked like a real human. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This thing was staring at me all the time. And it was in the other room, and my grandmother had passed away. My great-grandma. I think it was my great-grandma. And I got an eerie feeling from this house anyway. They found a hidden room in the cellar, and like it was just an eerie house, dude. And this doll was in there, and it felt like the damn thing was watching me. And I hated sleeping in that room. I would sleep downstairs. I felt like something was watching me. I hate dolls like that. Just like I hate, and don't get me wrong, I'm glad people do the clowns as a profession. I don't hate them. I just don't like clowns because they creep me out. And I say they smell like cabbage, but that's a whole nother story. But dolls, for some reason, bug me. And I just, not like stuffed animals, I can deal with that. But dolls, like porcelain dolls especially, I don't know what it is. And I'm not a person that fears a lot of things in my life. I'm not really scared of anything. But for some reason, I can't handle those things. I can't have them staring at me. And I swear, some of these dolls have moved, have stared at me, it just feels like that. There's just not a good presence. And I don't know if you've ever dealt with that, James, in your life. Have you ever had anything, an eerie feeling of a puppet or some kind of mannequin or porcelain doll staring at you? Did you ever have that feeling before?
One time I did. I go to a lot of different shops. You know, I'm a guy that loves history. So I'm always going into these old, out-of-the-way, hole-in-the-wall places that sell the coolest, weirdest, you know what I mean? I love that kind of stuff. I'm not much of an antique guy, which you would think I would be because I love history so much. But I'm not into like old antiques. I'm into very strange things. So I'm always going into these little off-the-wall shops and buying, you know, like a little statue that is like 150 years old or something. It's just the creepiest looking things you could ever imagine. And usually I will buy anything like that. And you know, most people look at it and say, whoa, I don't want no part of that. That's spooky looking. You know what I mean? I love that stuff. My house is full of these kind of items that I love to go find and buy. But one time I'm in one of these shops and there is this porcelain doll. And it wasn't like most porcelain dolls you see are like a Victorian style doll. You know what I mean? They're the real prim and proper kind of doll. They usually have fancy lace clothing and dresses on. This doll wasn't like that. And it kind of fit every little requirement that I have to buy something and bring home. Okay, it was creepy looking. It was scary. It was completely different. I had never seen anything like it before. It was the size of a small child, probably between 3 and 4 feet, I would say this doll was. Most dolls like that you find are either sitting, like in a sitting position, they come with a chair of some sort, or they are standing up, but they're on a pedestal, and they have like a stiff rod going up the back that holds them in place. This doll was standing, but it didn't have any supports of any kind. It wasn't on a pedestal. There was no rod going through it in any way. There was no stand that it was sitting on. It was simply standing there. And it wasn't standing in like a rigid, straight up and down kind of posture. You know what I mean? Like standing at attention, like most of those dolls are. It was standing kind of in a laid back, casual kind of way, as if it was just a person just hanging out with you. You know what I mean? It was very weird. It's the only way I can really describe it as weird, because it didn't have the normal posture that I'm used to seeing in these kind of dolls. It really looked almost like a person standing there, as opposed to a rigid piece of ceramic standing there, or porcelain. But it didn't look like a person. I mean, you could tell that it was a porcelain doll. It was not at all lifelike. But it also wasn't beautiful. Like most porcelain dolls you see are female, and they are just beautiful, you know? This was a female, but it didn't have the standard beautiful look to it. It was a very creepy looking doll. And just something about it, when I looked at it, I got a really bad feeling inside me. And I'm a guy that usually I trust my gut, you know, because I believe that your gut really can sense things, and it'll tell you when something's not right. So you should always trust your gut. And when I looked at this doll, I just got that gut feeling like, I'm not taking that damn thing home. There's something wrong with that. You know, I had that I guess you could call it the fight or flight response, to where I looked at this thing and I thought, I'm either going to pick up a stick or a bat or a club or something and bash this damn thing into a million pieces, or I'm going to turn around and get the hell out of here right now. One of these two things is going to happen, because I do not like this doll. It is freaky, and it's creeping me out, and it's making me feel not too good. And that's another part of it that was interesting to me, is I felt great that day. I was having a wonderful day. I had a good amount of money in my pocket that I could blow and have fun with. I had found this really interesting little shop
That's always good.
Right in the middle of a section of Old Town, to where it sold just the coolest, strangest little things. And to me, I'm in heaven when I find something like it. The only thing that's better than that to me is if I find a dusty old bookstore that sells like old books, to where I can find like books on lore and stuff like that. I mean, that's where I get some of the information that I pass on in this show, is through some of the old books that were published like in the 1800s to 1700s, these old books of lore that I can find those things contain such valuable information. So the only thing that makes me happier than being in one of these really cool antique kind of off-the-wall shops is when I'm in an old dusty bookstore. But I had found this cool shop, and I had found several cool little things that I wanted to buy in the shop already. You know what I mean? And then I come across this doll, and I went from feeling good and happy and wonderful to feeling sick on my stomach and not really scared, but to be completely honest with you, I felt pissed off. I felt angry. I wanted to hurt somebody or hurt something. I wanted to bash something. I felt like the Incredible Hulk in a way. I Hulk smash. I wanted to destroy something. That's the feeling I had inside myself. And I'm not that guy. You know what I mean? I am absolutely not that guy. I'm big, okay? I'm 6'4", about 300 pounds. I'm a scary looking guy. And I can do a lot of damage if I want to. But I'm a gentle giant. I love people. I'm not a person that wants to hurt you or anybody else, usually. So for me to be overcome with that kind of hate and rage and just feeling of that I wanted to hurt somebody is not a usual thing for me, unless I'm in traffic. You know, if you're in traffic, that's a whole different story for, I think, everybody. But that's not who I usually am. So for me to feel that, something was wrong there, you know? So I had that feeling, and like I said, I was also, all of a sudden, when I got up next to the doll, I felt nauseous as well. And I just had an overwhelming sense of being creeped out, that it just, something was wrong. You know, something was wrong with that doll. So needless to say, I did not buy the doll. And like I had said, I had found several other things in the shop that were very cool that I wanted to buy. But I didn't buy any of those either. Because after I saw that doll and had those feelings, I thought, you know what? I'm not buying any damn thing in this store, just in case. It's, you know, just in case that some of that bad juju rubbed off on some of this other stuff somehow. You know, probably didn't happen, but, you know, just to be safe, I'm not buying any of it. So I left the store, and a couple minutes after I left the store and started walking down the street back towards where my car was parked, all of a sudden I felt fine again. I didn't feel mad anymore. I didn't feel sick anymore. I didn't feel in any way other than wonderful again. All was right with the world again. There was a smile on my face. I whistled a happy tune as I skipped on down the road. Felt great. So to me, I think that it probably had something to do with that doll. Or maybe it was psychosomatic, and just because the doll was creepy, I got some weird feelings. Who knows? But I'm a guy that is involved in the paranormal field. I live this stuff, you know. I write horror novels for a living. I dream all my novels, so there's a paranormal element to what I do anyway. I do a lot of shows on paranormal subjects with some of the top paranormal people in the world who are true experts in a lot of these fields. I study lore. I have for like 30 years. So almost as long as I've been alive, I've been studying the ancient lores and legends of these things. I just really love this stuff. So I'm not a guy that is going to get panicked and overreact very easily. Okay, I'm not a guy that's going to see a creepy doll and all of a sudden it's going to make me sick on my stomach and feel all crazy because I'm paranoid something might be inside the doll. That's not who I am. You know, I'm a vet at this kind of stuff. So I really don't think it was a psychosomatic response because I don't get scared. I just don't. And that's not being macho. I just don't. I mean, I live a living hell every night when I close my eyes. I see the worst possible murders and death and just horrible, horrible things that you could ever imagine. The things that I write about in my novels, those are the things that I see every time I close my eyes at night. For my entire life, it's been that way. So a little doll is not going to scare me. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get overcome just because I see something like that. It's just not going to happen to me. So I think that there was something either in that doll. Now, whether it was a demon or the doll was cursed or haunted or what it was, or maybe there was just some psychic residue. Maybe the doll was involved in a tragedy of some sort. It was in the room when something horrible happened. Some of that bad energy got absorbed into the doll. That's what I felt. Who knows? I'm not, as far as I know, a psychic in any way, but who knows? But there was something off about it. I'll say that. Enough so that it changed my mood, it changed my thoughts, and it made me sick on my stomach. And that has never happened to me before, and it has never happened since. And I've actually been involved in some paranormal investigations. I've been like along for the ride, so to speak, and went to some of these places. I've been to some of the most haunted places around. I've checked out a lot of these things for myself, sometimes with other people, sometimes all by myself. So that should tell you right there that I'm not scared if I'm willing to go into one of these places alone. So there was something with that doll. So I guess that answers Old Boy's question. What I wanted to talk about also, though, as far as the possessed doll, that was the question we were trying to answer here, trying to shed a little light on it. So basically, the answer that we have, and the reason I'm summing this up after Old Boy gave his explanation instead of before, because I wanted him to be able to explain it so that everybody can understand it, because I couldn't go into the kind of detail that he does. But basically, to sum it up, can a doll be possessed? The answer to that is yes and no. And that's not a very satisfying answer, I understand that. But it's a truthful answer. It cannot truly be possessed because it doesn't have a soul. But a demon can hide inside the doll to use it as its little house, so to speak, its hideout, so that it can get to you, basically. While it's not truly possessed, for all intents and purposes, it is possessed. You know what I mean? The demon is inside of the doll. The demon is moving the doll. Okay? Now, I don't believe that there's probably ever been a case like the Chucky movies, where there's a doll running around killing people and stuff. I don't think that has any basis in reality, but I know there have been reports of dolls that have moved. That Letta doll that Old Boy was talking about earlier, that thing is supposedly, it has a pulse. When you hold that doll, you can feel a pulse, is what the reports say about it. And that's pretty spectacular. You know, that's interesting as hell. I don't know exactly why a doll would have a pulse. It obviously is not going to have a heart that beats. It's not going to have veins and arteries that pump blood through it in order to form a pulse. But somehow it has a pulse. That's very interesting to me. And that is proof to me that something exists within that doll. Some other living force exists within the doll. There was another doll that every time the person would try to sell it, they would get the money for the doll, they would put the doll in a box, they would ship it out, and then when the box arrived at the person who bought the doll's house, the box would be completely empty. And the next day the doll would be back in the guy's house again. I mean, that is creepy as hell. You know what I mean? That's awesome. That shows that there's something going on here. There's a lot of reports, and you know, there's the obvious reports that are kind of just stories that you hear about it, and then there are reports from people like the Warrens, okay? People that are credible in the field and have a lot of experience. And that tells you, whether you agree with the Warrens or you don't agree with their assessment, it tells you that there is something going on there, okay? So to simply say that a doll cannot be haunted or cannot be possessed, that's just not being intellectually honest. I mean, let's just face it. There is some kind of phenomenon that is going on with these dolls. Now, whether it is the doll being possessed, or the doll being haunted, or even the doll just being cursed, it doesn't have to be one or the other. You know, I think all of those are true. I think there are credible reports of dolls that were possessed because they acted under their own power. They didn't simply move a little bit, which could be just, you know, explained by poltergeist activity. That could be a haunted doll. But they actually seem to have a mind of their own and react to stimuli. So that would tell me that that doll has an intelligent force that is living inside of it. Now that goes back to is the doll actually possessed, or is it just a house, basically? But you say tomato, I say tomato. The effect is the same.
Now I'm gonna have to. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this. I believe, but I do believe in differently. So remember this, guys. I believe it can have a soul, and because I think it can get a spirit can get trapped in there, or put in there by somebody or a curse. And I believe this because I've heard stories and seen things. But it doesn't mean I'm wrong or right. It just, that's my opinion. I believe you. I have a difference of opinion on souls. Some people say you can't sell your soul. Some people say you can. And I don't really know the whole story on that, and I'm not going to sit here and say I do. But there's always a possibility for everything. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write on it being cursed. I can 100% say it can be. Possessed, almost 100%. A spirit or a soul, that's a flip of a coin. So I'm going to say probably. Not going to say 100% yes, but I'm going to go more on the leaning into the yes, that anything is possible. James is going to go on the curse part, but I believe there's really, like he said, there's no right or wrong answer, or right or yes or no. So I'll just go where there's a probable, pretty much certain that I have a yes on this one. And okay, like you said, I was in the occult. I did stuff that I wasn't really supposed to. So, that's where I'm coming by. And stories I've heard from witches and people who I met and stuff I read on with books. See, this is the stuff I love doing. This whole thing is something of it's a dream. I'm living my dream. Like he lives dreams, and he writes books. He gets all his stuff from dreams. And what we're doing on this radio show is my dream, because I get to talk about all this crazy stuff. And I think it's good because it gets stuff and demons out of me. But I believe there's a possibility, and I explained it the best I could, but I believe that there is a possibility, like when you said that doll had a pulse, there's something else going on that we don't know, and I never will. And that's what I'll leave it at. Now, sorry about it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was just
no
giving
worries.
my last
We don't actually disagree on this point. You think that we disagree, but I was actually just getting ready to get to that point. The idea of a doll being used to hold a soul, a soul being stolen and put into the doll. Okay, yes, a doll can act as a prison the same way it can act as a house for a demon. But when a doll is acting as a prison to hold that soul, that doll still does not have a soul. Okay? Just because it's acting as a prison to hold the soul doesn't make that soul belong to the doll. The soul still belongs to the person it was stolen from. It's just being held in the doll. So the doll itself doesn't actually have a soul to be possessed. If the demon possesses the soul inside the doll, it's possessing the soul of the person that the soul came from, not of the soul of the doll. It's a little minor point, but to me it makes all the difference in the world. In this case, possession, and pardon the pun, possession is not 9/10 of the law. Okay, just because the doll contains the soul of a human does not make that human soul the doll's soul. It's simply acting as a prison, the same way it's acting as a house for the demon. You see what I'm saying, old boy?
I believe that could be a possibility, but I also believe that your spirit can be put. You're basically right. That would make sense, because then it gets stuck into this, into a prison. But there's also stories of dolls and people who have died who they haunted that whole becomes the whole haunting thing and accursed. They haunted this, they stick onto this doll and they haunt people. See, and that becomes where it's not a prison. So they're doing it for purpose. So, I mean, it could go either way, but I get your point. And you make a very valid point. Yeah, we only have 6 minutes to go. Sorry, guys. This is a really good episode, and down the line we'll do another one, but I'm going to give a shout out to all the listeners, everybody who's been giving us support. I love what we're doing. Our show is getting awesome. And I'm just going to say I love what I'm doing. This is a dream. I get to work with one of the best authors in horror in our generation. Awesome guy, one of the best guys in the world to work for. And I'm doing something I've always wanted to do. I've always been in the paranormal, cryptology, all these creatures, cryptozoology, myths, legends. This is my dream, and I'm doing it. And I love this show. I love our listeners. Thank you guys. I love you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you for listening to us. Remember, always check out our shows on James Hershey's Facebook page or YouTube page. Just subscribe and listen to our old shows. And I want to give a shout out to my daughter on the passing of her grandfather last week. And I love you, and I hope you feel better, baby. And if you guys want her mother, Stacy Ash Barnes, or Barnes Ash, sorry, my ex-wife is having a GoFund on her Facebook page, so you guys can check it out on Stacy Ash, and you guys can help her out because that's what they're because he wasn't a rich man, and he kind of get some help because the funerals are very expensive, and we all know that. So if you guys anything can help, even if a sorry and write them a condolence. It doesn't matter. Whatever you guys could do. But check that out on Stacy Ash, its Facebook page. And I love you. You guys all have a good night. And remember, when you look into the abyss, it's always staring back. Good night, Misfits, Sugar Ladies, and Demon Hunters. Good night.
I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Christmas is a pretty cool time of year, if you really break it down, because it's the only time of year that you have the opportunity to make everybody that you love smile. And that's a beautiful thing. To me, Christmas isn't about the gifts as far as receiving stuff. I don't care about that. I don't care what I get for Christmas. For me, it's more about doing something and giving something to the people that I love that will make them happy and make them smile. So if you have people in your life, make them smile, man, because that's a powerful, powerful thing. Because it doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. At the end of the day, when you're laying on your deathbed, you can't take it with you. That's what they say, right? But one thing you can take with you is that joy and that love that you felt in your whole life. When you're laying there dying, that's what you're going to be holding on to, is the love of your family and the good times, the happy memories. And so just keep that in mind and just make some happy memories, man. Put some of those in the bank so that when you reach your end, you have something to smile about. But I want to thank you guys, like I said, for listening. We appreciate you. I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy whatever, solstice, all that kind of jazz. Whatever kind of religion you are or non-religion, whatever. Just happy holidays to you. And also want to talk about the Patreon page. I figured out a little bit how to use that thing. So I've actually set up some reward tiers on it. I had no idea you had to set up reward tiers. Like I said, I knew nothing about it. So if you guys want to go check that out, it's patreon.com/James Hershey Jr. That's the Patreon page for the Staring Into the Abyss show. If you want to go on there and support the show, that would be awesome. We appreciate that. Check out the YouTube page, like Old Boy said. It's youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. On there, you have all our old videos, and you also have a bunch of different side projects and stuff like that we do as well. Bunch of fun for you, completely 100% free, and it always will be. I'll never charge you a penny for the YouTube page, so enjoy it. That's why I work very hard to get all that stuff up there for you. So, with that being said, we love you guys, and we will see you next week. Until then, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. We love you. Bye-bye.